the end of this year, while the impacts may last for years in low-income countries. Advanced economies are investing nearly 28% of their GDP in economic recovery. And for middle-income countries, that number falls to 6.5%. And it plummets to 1.8% for the least developed countries of this planet, a tiny percentage of a much smaller amount. In sub-Saharan Africa, the IMF projects a cumulative economic growth per capita over the next 5 years will be 75% less than the rest of the world. Now, on a more positive note, we are observing some encouraging trends. For example, the African Union now has in place a green stimulus package and a green recovery action plan, while the European Union, as we all know, has its Green Deal. At national level, several countries are introducing restoration programs for new jobs, scrapping fossil fuel subsidies, attaching green conditionalities to bailouts, requiring climatic and biodiversity disclosures from companies, and providing incentives for environmental services and goods. Nonetheless, if we're honest, only about a third of recovery measures to date can be considered as green. Legislation is a key driver of action, and the legislative measures taken now will have implications for all of us on our planet's future. As parliamentarians entrusted by your electorates, you are in a unique position to protect this future. You have the opportunity to ensure that legislative measures taken now are in line with both developmental and environmental goals. Equally important in exercising your oversight and budgeting functions in a manner that promotes a green recovery. So with that, a green recovery is surely the only viable pathway to achieve the goals and targets of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. And lastly, let me please quote two of my bosses. In the words of our executive director at UNEP, protecting nature and the climate and limiting pollution and waste is not only a smart economic decision, but a non-negotiable for future economic growth. And in the words of our UN Secretary General, don't wait for others to make the first move, do your part. With that, please let me again thank you to the IPU and to the Indonesian Parliament for this opportunity to be a part of this discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. A green revolution is the only way to go. And now I want to invite a couple of you, honorable members of parliament, on stage to just let us know of any interventions you're making in your country to ensure that we are all on the road towards a sustainable green revolution. And the first one is Mr. Warren William, member of the IPU Standing Committee on Sustainable Development, member of Parliament of Seychelles. The floor is yours.
Thank you. My name is Warren William, and I would like to contribute to the debate. Well, coming from our approaches that we have done from Seychelles, it's interesting to note that at the beginning of 2021, our debt to GDP was about over 100%. And we just had an election in October last year. So you can imagine the new government coming in with very little options around the pandemic, COVID-19 issues. So our tourism industry was really on its knees. We had no money, but our leaders, they put forward a very aggressive campaign of vaccination. So this is key, one of the crucial and paramount, decision that was taken for us to have most of our population vaccinated. And then we had to open our borders very early in March so that tourists would come in. So we wanted to reach herd immunity so that visitors would feel safe coming to Seychelles. So if we did not go into the intensive vaccination campaign, we would not have been able to open our borders, and our economic situation would have been further downgraded, and we would not have been able to do much. But now I'm happy to say that our debt to GDP, after only 11 months, has reached 80% to GDP, and tourists are coming in, and the economic machine which revolves around our economic pillars, which is tourism, is booming. So I feel that coming from a small island state, what we have done has been very, very important in terms of getting our economy going, creating jobs, and then addressing the issues of sustainable development goals. But what I would like to say is that, I mean, we recognize the differentiated approaches being taken by different countries, but some countries are very vulnerable, such as the small island states. So we are very thankful to all our partners who have assisted us, but still we are looking for other supports, even if we are considered a high middle income country. Because with the pandemic COVID, we found that, I mean, there's a reversal in terms of achieving the SDGs. So I believe that most countries in the differentiated approach should be looking at the strong points to move forward. I thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Member from Seychelles. Now, before we go to Thailand, Rwanda, and Algeria, I know I can see your hands up, but please give me a moment. Let's just allow Mr. Agis Sina Roy, Senior Climate Change Specialist from the Asian Development Bank, to give us a few remarks. Then I will come to the members of Parliament. Mr. Roy, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, and a very good afternoon, everybody. Thanks to the organizers for inviting us for a discussion. It was great to hear from the previous session on the high agenda that Parliament can provide towards climate change. I have three specific requests to the parliamentarians in the context of COVID-19 recovery. First is the importance to deal with COVID-19 recovery and the climate crisis together and with same urgency. I think this is important because while we all are eagerly waiting for the pandemic to get over and for our lives to get back to normal, however, ladies and gentlemen, there will be no normal, because even before the COVID-19 pandemic has hit us all, we as a world was already in the climate crisis, and which is unfortunately here to stay for long. The climate impacts are destroying lives, livelihoods of millions of people and economies in every part of the world. And as we are seeing from various events, including the heat stress in the US or Canada, or the floods in Germany, or tropical cyclones in the South Pacific Islands. Thus, sustainable and resilient recovery is only possible if we tackle climate crisis head-on along with the COVID-19 recovery. My second request is to ensure that the recovery process leaves no one behind. And this is important because the pandemic has a disproportionate impact on the poor and marginalized population, who are already often disproportionately at harm because of climate shocks and stresses. Millions of people who have graduated from poverty in recent decades have unfortunately slipped back into poverty. And this trend will continue with climate change. We will see increase in poverty, increase in internal migration, and potential conflict. That is very critical that the COVID-19 recovery process really puts people at the center, especially women, at the center of the recovery process to ensure it's fair and equitable. And which means having explicit attention and support towards building resilience of the poorest population, including through improvements of social protection programs that are shock responsive, including increased investments in vocational training and skill buildings for new kind of green jobs, as well as investments in community-driven programs that, while providing employment, also protects the ecosystem. And my third request is to ensure that the recovery process really enables transformation. Business as usual recovery, which we usually see in other disasters, may not be applicable in this case, because the kind of crisis we are dealing with, both the pandemic and climate change, are very systemic and requires system-wide intervention. For example, the cup of coffee that we enjoy every morning, no matter where we are in the world, might be difficult in the future if the coffee growers, farmers in Vietnam or in Ethiopia struggle to grow coffee in a changing climate context. So we do live in a very interconnected world, and we need to address these issues at a much more systemic level by questioning on what and how much we consume, how we travel, and how we interact. But the good thing is that these transformational approaches need not compromise with economic development, and nor do they always necessarily cost more. In fact, there's enough evidence which shows that transformational approaches, if they're designed carefully in a comprehensive manner and a phased approach where you're looking at reforms of policy, institutional strengthening, backed with suitable investments, then these transformative processes can provide huge economic benefits, can create employment, ensure higher food and energy security, as well as produce health co-benefits. Thus, in conclusion, it's critical for us that the recovery process is seen as an opportunity to build resilience to all kinds of future shocks and stresses, to ensure the process is inclusive so no one is left behind, and ensure the recovery process is really facilitating transformational change needed in our society. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Roy, for that presentation and for your request to rather appeals to the members of parliament who are listening to you and us today. And now we'll hear from the member from Rwanda and then Algeria. Please unmute your mic, put your video on, and you have 2 minutes to give us your comments. Member from Rwanda, I don't know if you can hear me. If not, we can move to Algeria, then we'll come back to the member representing Rwanda. So the rep for Algeria, please put your mic on and your video, and let's hear what you have to say. Okay, I think we can go to the next person. Alice, are you ready? Alice from Rwanda? Good. Alice Muzana from Rwanda, your hand is up. Sorry, you're having issues with your audio? Sorry, she's having issues with her audio. So can we go to Thailand? No, Thailand I've already spoken. So we don't have, Rwanda is having issues with their audio. Algeria, are you here?
I'm okay now.
Great, thank you. Welcome, Alice. Sure, go ahead.
Thank you. I couldn't unmute myself without the permission of the host. Fortunately, yeah. It's okay now.
Right.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Thank you for granting me the floor. I would like to thank the House of Representatives of Indonesia and IPU for having organized this very insightful meeting. It's a great opportunity to revisit our contribution as parliamentarians regarding the achievement of SDGs as we face COVID-19 related challenges. As far as sustainable and resilient recovery of our economies are concerned, I wish to share with you that the government of Rwanda has established an economic recovery fund to support the recovery of businesses hardest hit by COVID-19 so that they can survive, resume operations, and safeguard deployment, thereby cushioning the economic effect of the pandemic. This recovery fund will support mainly all businesses highly impacted by the restrictions put in place to prevent the spread of the virus, including those with global supply chains that have been disrupted. I can mention tourism, agri-processing, transport-related businesses. And the fund will create a window to support SMEs through microfinance institutions. The Parliament of Rwanda plays its role of oversight to make sure the recovery fund reaches the most needful beneficiaries for a general purpose of promoting the welfare of the population we represent, leaving no one behind, especially during this critical moment of COVID-19 pandemic. And while voting the budget, the Parliament ensures that enough budget is made available for the fund. Thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you very much, Alice from Rwanda. Good to hear what Rwanda is doing, even as we all gear towards a green revolution. And now we'll go to Thailand. Member from Thailand, I can see your hand up. Yes, please. Great. Member from Thailand, please put your mic on and your video on, and let's hear what you have to say. You have 2 minutes to give us your presentation.
Thank you. The impact of COVID-19 outbreak continues to take a heavy toll on our economies and people's welfare, and has driven our global economy to one of the biggest economy turndowns in decades. The Parliament of Thailand has been supporting the Thai government in issuing numerous financial measures for economic and social rehabilitation, such as the recent raising of ceiling in public debt to GDP ratio from 60% to 70%, expand liquidity in national economy. Thai government has also introduced economic response packages to relieve the financial burden in order to boost the economy, such as credit guarantee and debt restructure, to promote investment and to reduce the interest burden of both public and private sectors. The Bank of Thailand has also adjusted many economic regulations aiming to reduce the financial restriction and promote the funding access to SME. We must admit that the viruses are here to stay for years to come. It is crucial that we must learn to coexist with the COVID-19 and foster a more resilient and sustainable societies under the context of the next normal world. So we would not leave no one behind. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, member from Thailand. And now, Chad, I can see your hand up, Mr. Issa Mardo from Chad. If you can hear me, let's hear your commitments and what your country is doing on issues around climate change. Issa? Welcome, sir. We can't hear you, sir. Member from Chad, we cannot hear you, sir. All right, and I'm sorry we cannot hear you. I think there's an issue with your microphone. There's an issue with your microphone. As you sort that out, please allow me to move to Algeria. Member from Algeria.
Yes.
Yes.
نعم الجزائر معك.
Oh, great. Go ahead.
اوكي. شكرا على هذه المبادرة من الاتحاد البرلماني الدولي وبرلمان اندونيسيا على تنظيم هذا المنتدى الذي يعنى بتحقيق أهداف التنمية المستدامة وفي ظل جائحة كورونا. أعتقد أن جائحة كورونا بقدر ما كانت قاسية وخلفت آثارا وأضرارا بشرية واقتصادية، إلا أنها في المقابل نبهت هذه الجائحة إلى جملة من المخاطر، لعل هذه المخاطر إن على مستوى البيئي وتأثيراتها خاصة على مستوى الأمن الغذائي، ثم على المستوى الأمن يعني الصحي. وأنتقل إلى استعراض يعني تجربة الجزائر في مواجهة الجائحة، حيث اتخذت الدولة حزمة من الإجراءات لمواجهة الجائحة، وخاصة في مرحلة الغلق الاقتصادي، حيث تقرر التكفل بالأشخاص المتضررين والذين فقدوا مناصب العمل، وكانت هناك عدة مساعدات على حساب الدولة. ثم انتقلنا الآن إلى مرحلة جديدة، وهي مرحلة هندسة ما يسمى الخروج والتعافي ما بعد جائحة كورونا، من خلال حزمة من الإجراءات التي تتعلق أساسا ب يعني تعزيز الرعاية الصحية والتكفل الصحي من خلال يعني تعميم اللقاح. وبالنسبة للجزائر اليوم هو يوم تاريخي، اليوم نشهد بأن نصنع اللقاح في الجزائر، ويشرف على هذا يعني هذا الحدث هو الوزير الأول الجزائري. كذلك الجزائر عززت الإجراءات تاع الحماية والتكفل بالطبقات الهشة، ثم تعزيز يعني التحفيز الاقتصادي من خلال إعفاء المؤسسات وتأجيل دفع المستحقات، سواء فوائد البنوك أو الضرائب أو الاشتراكات في صناديق التقاعد والضمان الاجتماعي. كل هذه الإجراءات بهدف التخفيف من تبعات وباء كورونا وإعادة تحفيز النشاط الاقتصادي وإعادة العجلة الاقتصادية إلى يعني سيرورتها العادية. وفي الأخير ما يمكن أن أقوله في هذا التدخل القصير أن الجائحة كورونا نبهت يعني العالم كله إلى ضرورة المزيد من التعاون كبرلمانيين، كمؤسسات، كصانعي القرار، إلى ضرورة التعاون وتنسيق الجهود الدولية من أجل التكفل أفضل، خاصة في مسألة التكفل بالطبقات الهشة وضمان أكثر يعني الاحتواء والإنصاف، خاصة في مسألة الوصول إلى اللقاح للدول الإفريقية تحديدا، والقضاء على كل مظاهر الفقر والتأخر في التنمية، من أجل أن تكون هناك عدالة في توزيع الثروات على مستوى العالم، ومن أجل تحقيق أهداف التنمية المستدامة، خاصة الهدف الثالث ونحن في ظل هذه الجائحة، وهو ضمان الرعاية الصحية والتكفل الصحية وتحقيق الرفاهية للجميع. وشكرا.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. That is Algeria. Do we have Issa Mardo from Chad? Issa from Chad. No. Any other person? Thailand, did they give you?
Wait.
Is that Issa?
Yes.
Hi, we cannot see you, but I can hear you. Issa, are you ready to come on screen, on stage? Let us know what Chad is doing in regards to climate change and all the commitments. Go on.
Vous me voyez maintenant?
Yes. Yes, yes, we can see you.
Ok. Comme je le disais, je voudrais vous féliciter et vous dire que le Tchad, de par sa position géographique extrême, est exposé aux effets des changements climatiques, et le Tchad subit de plein fouet les effets de ces changements climatiques. Et en tant que responsable en charge des ODD, vous savez que tous les ODD sont liés depuis la pauvreté jusqu'au partenariat. Et je voudrais relever ici que le Tchad a fait un programme de relance de l'économie post-Covid qui est axé principalement sur ces richesses habituelles et naturelles que sont l'agriculture et l'élevage. C'est pourquoi un comité national est mis en place pour réfléchir sur une stratégie de sécurité alimentaire post-Covid pour la relance de ce secteur. Donc, sécurité alimentaire qui prend en compte l'agriculture, l'élevage, mais également les autres activités liées à la pêche de par sa position, est connu sur ce qu'on appelle le lac Tchad qui a perdu 90% de ses capacités, est en train de travailler dans ce sens pour justement renflouer le lac Tchad, permettre à ces populations de se prendre en charge. Et c'est pourquoi, dans le cadre de cette reprise, l'accent est mis sur aussi le développement de l'élevage, parce que le Tchad, c'est un pays aussi d'élevage. Et donc, les autorités ont mis en place des subventions ou également d'alléger certaines taxes, promouvoir certains emplois, créer des emplois aux jeunes, et ceci pour permettre la relance de notre économie. Et donc, comme vous le savez, cette situation nous lie avec ce qui est aujourd'hui appelé Glasgow, parce qu'il y a le grand sommet sur les changements climatiques, et le Tchad a mis en place un comité ad hoc multisectoriel qui a travaillé et qui a déjà élaboré sa feuille de route avec un budget. Et donc, nous venons avec vraiment des propositions. Et l'une des propositions, c'est également de présenter la révision de notre contribution déterminée au niveau national, mais aussi de notre plan national d'adaptation au changement climatique. Donc, en gros, voilà ce que nous sommes en train de faire au niveau national pour relever notre économie, mais également aussi par rapport au changement climatique, qu'est-ce que nous sommes en train de faire pour aller présenter à Glasgow. Et je crois que l'UIP va nous accompagner dans ce sens et la collaboration va continuer. Et donc, pour finir, je voudrais une fois de plus remercier l'UIP et le gouvernement d'Indonésie pour avoir organisé cette rencontre aussi importante, puisque le président du Parlement tchadien voudrait lui-même participer à cette rencontre, mais compte tenu de la situation du Tchad, un conseil national de transition vient d'être mis en place. Et vous savez, une grande partie des collègues députés ne sont plus dans ce conseil national de transition, et il s'agira pour nous de clôturer avec la 3e législature et de mettre en place ce nouveau conseil national de transition pour nous permettre de continuer la collaboration, de continuer de faire notre travail de législateur, puisque nous avons voté aussi plusieurs lois qui permettent aujourd'hui de booster notre économie. Je vous remercie.
Thank you very much, Mr. Issa Mardo from Chad. And now, for the last speaker for this session, allow me to invite member from Thailand. Thailand, the floor is yours.
Thailand has already have the floor.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Okay, that's great. I thought you had an additional statement to make, but thank you very much. And now, I think, ladies and gentlemen, that leaves us to go to the next session, which is another question for you guys. So, and this will intro the next session, our 6th session. So, a question for you: what you think are the biggest challenges to achieving the SDGs? Members of Parliament, what do you think are the biggest challenges to achieve the SDGs? Again, we are doing Menti.com, the Mentimeter. What do you think are the biggest challenges to achieving the SDGs? Please let me know, let me hear, let me see your answers. Go to Menti.com. We have a code that you need to input 920574. And there we go. Money, finances, people need money to help us achieve the SDGs. Let me see what your thoughts are on this question. What are the biggest challenges to achieving the SDGs? Short-term approach, legislation and budget. That's why we're here. That's why we feel it is really important to involve you, our members of parliament, in these discussions, because you have the ability to decide and to influence how the budgets for your countries look like and where investments go. Political will, thank you very much. That's why we have you here. Real action talk. We just don't talk and let it end here. We talk and act on it. So thank you very much. Keep your answers coming. And then, ladies and gentlemen, that marks the end of our 5th session and our 2nd session for the day. And now we're going to go into our final session for the day, and that is in mobilizing SDGs financing. It is essential that parliamentarians understand the sources of funding available in their countries and take time to consider different strategies on how best to prioritize these funds. So this next session will explore how parliaments and you parliamentarians can make use of your oversight tools to ensure government responsibilities are being upheld and that scarce financial resources are used to the greatest benefit of your constituents. And before we listen to some of your interventions, allow me to welcome on the virtual stage again, Ms. Karin Jabra, Director of the Divisions of Programs, IPU, and just to give us a look ahead of something the IPU is launching today. Ms. Karin, good to see you.
Thank you very much, Mercy, and it's a great pleasure to be with all of you today. A big hello from Geneva. And as I said, I'm very pleased to join you again and have an opportunity to present to you today a new tool for parliamentarians that we hope will support your work in achieving the SDGs. We heard throughout yesterday's discussions and today how COVID-19 has dramatically set back SDG progress, affecting all aspects of financing for development. We are experiencing the worst economic recession in 90 years, and the most vulnerable are paying the effects disproportionately. Around 120 million people have fallen back into extreme poverty. 114 million jobs have been lost. Tax revenues, foreign direct investment, trade and remittances have decreased, and debt vulnerabilities have increased along with the rise in debt levels. Many countries are in the process of adjusting their national priorities in the wake of COVID-19 and developing recovery packages. Now, we all know that resources, and you've just said it with the poll, and funding are at the heart of achieving the SDGs. The readjustment of national budgets will certainly impact in one way or another progress towards the achievement of the goals. As funds are redirected from longer-term development objectives to more immediate recovery measures, the effect on SDGs needs to be taken into account. Parliaments, and we all know that, have a key responsibility in ensuring that funding and resources are invested effectively to support sustainable development and to ensure that budgets are monitored with the SDG targets in mind. Parliaments are also responsible for adopting the national budgets, making sure governments are held accountable on how resources are spent, and ensuring that budgets and expenditures are in line with national and international commitments. The task is big and expectations are high, all the more so that there is increasing recognition among parliaments of their role in financing for the SDGs. With that in mind, and to assist parliaments and their members in these important responsibilities, we have developed guidelines on financing the SDGs. These guidelines aim to provide parliamentarians with a better understanding of issues related to budgeting, monitoring, and policy choices for the SDGs. They build on experience from the parliamentary community and benefited as well from valuable input and guidance from UNDP colleagues, whom we would like to thank. Making the most of limited public resources requires a thoughtful review of a country's budgeting practices and regular communication with all relevant stakeholders. It is essential to understand the sources of funding that are available in countries and take the time to consider different strategies on how best to prioritize them, both when financial resources are readily available and when they are scarce. The publication provides information on key SDG budgeting topics and current challenges and identifies concrete actions that you parliamentarians can take to advance efforts to achieve the goals set out in the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. We hope that you will find this tool useful in carrying out your responsibilities to secure adequate funding for the realization of the SDGs, leaving no one behind. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you, Ms. Karen. That's a really impressive tool. So how are they going to access, or where again are they going to find it? On the IPU website?
Exactly. It will be sent out to all the IPU members and parliaments, but you will, of course, access it on the IPU website in various languages. And feel free to contact us if you need any assistance in also using this tool in your parliaments. Would be very happy to provide tailored assistance to help parliaments achieve progress. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Ms. Karina. Again, a huge thank you to IPU and FAST for organizing this and for all these really important documents, really important publications and tools, even as we all work on achieving the Agenda 2030. And now, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to introduce on stage Mr. Charles Schaufel, the Global Lead, Inclusive Processes and Institutions from UNDP, to give his remarks. You're welcome, sir.
Thank you very much, Mercy. I'm a big fan and listen to you often, so it's lovely to see you in the flesh, so to speak.
Oh, thank you.
And Karine, thank you very much for the acknowledgement of UNDP's inputs into the guidance on SDG financing. Honourable members, some of you will know me. I used to be a Member of Parliament in New Zealand for 7 years before I joined UNDP. So I understand some of the unique opportunities and challenges that are inherent in your role. I do think that this guidance is very good. But one thing I would say from UNDP's perspective, again, many of you know that we work a lot with the IPU. We're the largest implementer of parliamentary support programs in the world. We work with about 65 partner countries, many of those who are participating in the meeting today. And I would say this about SDG financing. Please don't think that it's a new and mysterious and difficult to master topic. A lot of the things in SDG financing are things that we as former and current parliamentarians do every day. It's protecting the revenue base. It's making decisions on allocative efficiency on taxpayer and other funds. It's learning, sure, about the vertical funds and some of the new instruments that exist to finance the SDGs. But it's largely a lot of the work that we already do, but directed toward, hopefully, national development plans that are aligned with the SDG targets and indicators. And I know from the list of participants here that most countries have gone through that alignment process. What I want to do today is just give you 5 examples. And I'll hurry through them a little bit because I know we're running late and I don't want to exceed my allocation. But this will give you an idea, I think, both of the breadth of SDG financing and how familiar a lot of the concepts will be to you as MPs who know how to do oversight, representation, the budget cycle, and legislation. Let me start with Indonesia, our co-host. And although this meeting is billed as the first global parliamentary meeting on achieving the SDGs, I see from the participants list that many of us will recall that back in 2017, the Indonesian Parliament actually hosted the World Forum on Sustainable Development in Bali, and it was an annual event after that. This is a really significant fact. This was the first global South-led parliamentary engagement on sustainable development. And it's great to see now that Indonesia has collaborated with the IPU to take this meeting forward on an annual basis, on a collaborative basis. But Indonesia, you were first, and I really want to acknowledge that. Let me start by talking a little bit about the partnership with UNDP and the Indonesian government and parliament. We've got an innovative financing lab in Indonesia. It's been working to assist the government to issue the world's first green Islamic bond to leverage Islamic charitable giving. It's called Zakat for SDGs in terms of the global labeling that's been attached to it by development practitioners. And we're supporting an impact fund. So here are three examples of new financial instruments and sources of revenue that can be leveraged toward sustainable human development. I think that's really the most important point. Secondly, we're working with the Parliament to produce a guide on green climate finance. We've done this with the parliaments of Nepal and Pakistan already. We're now doing it with the Indonesian Parliament. And really what this will help the Parliament do is master the requirements of oversight in respect of green climate finance, a big source of vertical funding. Make sure that when the funding comes into the country, it's on the books and is appropriately scrutinised in the same way as other revenues, particularly when it's being implemented by, for example, UN partners or NGOs. So that's the first example. The second example is Tax Inspectors Without Borders. Many of you will know about this initiative. It's something that UNDP and the OECD are collaborating on. It arose out of the Addis Ababa Action Agenda and specifically the tax initiative there. And basically what we're doing is sharing knowledge and expertise on tax, defending the tax base and preventing financial leakage, sharing that from the global north to the global south. Basically, since the initiative was begun in 2016, 5 years ago, the initiative has mobilized more than $1 billion in additional tax revenues for developing countries, including some of the least developed. There are 42 completed and 45 existing programs. So there's a good example of an intervention to protect Parliament's role to ensure that it has access to public revenues when it's during the annual budget cycle. Case study 3. Better oversight through SDG-aligned development plans and parliamentary committee processes. UNDP has been working with the Parliament of Fiji and the government. So we've worked with them to align the National Development Plan with the SDG targets and indicators. And then what we've done is worked with the parliamentary committees. Honourable members, I know there's a temptation when you have a committee system to have lots of committees and keep people busy and give them a status if they're chairing the committees. What we're saying is have fewer, align the number in terms of reference of the committees to the National Development Plan, align the terms of reference, and then agree targets, baselines and indicators with the government agencies and departments that each committee oversees, and then agree periodic reporting on meeting those targets and indicators. And that's exactly the work that we've done with Fiji. And then, provide for regular reporting to the plenary of the Parliament and regular debates on the SDGs to improve national ownership of the development plan. Second to last case study 4, gender responsive budgeting. Many of you will know that one of the key principles of the SDGs is leaving no one behind and reaching first those most at risk of being left behind. And you also know that SDG 5 concerns the progress and rights of women and girls. Now, we have a project in the Portuguese-speaking African countries and Timor-Leste, funded by the European Commission. It started off as a parliamentary program in phase 1. Now it's a fiscalisation program, working with parliaments, their committees, ministries of finance, civil society, and the Supreme Audit Institution to basically improve the budget cycle, improve financial knowledge and improve the knowledge of the community on just what parliamentary budgeting is all about. We've trained about 1,000 MPs and senior staff in the project countries, and 400 of those people have been trained on gender responsive budgeting, how you make sure that the budget that Parliament approves every year has appropriate markers for communities such as women and girls to show that the funding is being earmarked for their progress, and that it can then be monitored as to its implementation. And one of the key results of this project is that the Parliament of Angola in 2018 amended the national budget to put these gender markers in, and also to require similar markers for the rights and welfare of children. It also committed to a much more open budgetary process. And I think this is a good example of using the SDGs for improving the general and ordinary work of Parliament in a way that's very beneficial to key communities, 51% of the population, women and girls, children, and others. Final case study, the use of technology. We worked with the Parliament and Government of Bangladesh last year to produce an app. We call it the My Constituency Tracker. What it is it's an application that gives members of Parliament and their research staff disaggregated information right down to the level of their constituency on the SDG-aligned National Development Plan, its indicators and targets. And what this allows MPs to do when they're in a public meeting or being asked by constituents, you know, what's happening with our hospital, what's happening with maternal and child mortality, what's happening with any of the SDG aligned indicators in the National Development Plan. The members have that information at their fingertips, literally on their phones in an app, and the information is updated regularly. And what it basically allows them to do is make evidence-based arguments for the allocation of resources to their constituencies in line with the development plan. I think it's a neat app. I think it should, I wish when I'd been an MP, I'd had something like this. And I'm sure many of you would see instantly the importance of this. UNDPs work with other parliaments in Serbia, many other countries, to try to harness technology in order to open the public finances and make your work as members of Parliament easier in terms of promoting accountability for the public spend. Those are the examples I want to give you. I think it shows both the breadth, as I say, of SDG financing, but also how ordinary and unsurprising and consistent with the regular business of being a legislator is. UNDP and IPU have worked together for many years on these issues. We are very proud of the fact that our efforts have put parliaments front and centre at international recognition of achieving the SDGs. And it's great that so many of you are interested in ensuring that you're au fait with the knowledge that you need to have in this area. I really do commend the guidance that Karine mentioned earlier, and I look forward to continuing on this journey with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Charles. And you're doing a really wonderful job supporting all these governments and all these nations to ensure that we are, you know, leaving no one behind and working together towards the achieving of Agenda 2030. So thank you very much for your remarks. I'm going to ask a couple of you to just come on stage and tell us how you're financing the SDGs, how you're navigating issues around finances when it comes to the SDGs. And please, there's so many of you here. I can see representatives from very many other countries, but I haven't heard from you. I haven't seen your hands up. So please, let's all participate. Give us your questions on chat. Please let me see your hands being raised, and we will hear some of the things you're doing. So please feel free to engage us. Raise your hand if you want to tell us things that you are doing as a country to finance for the SDGs. And for now, please welcome on stage the Independent Senator, Parliament of Canada, Ms. Mary-Lou McPhedran. This floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Dear colleagues, as a new member of the Bureau of the IPU Committee on Sustainable Development, I'm grateful to the Indonesian House of Representatives and the IPU for this first global parliamentary meeting on achieving the SDGs. As we know, the COVID pandemic has reduced our chances of achieving the SDGs by 2030. But as we face the facts in the alert from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, we must also face the truth that missing our sustainable development targets will cost us more in the long term. Indeed, we may have to pay the ultimate cost, massive loss of species, habitats, and human lives, especially of those most vulnerable and poor. The world cannot afford not to invest in sustainable development today. I salute all parliamentarians who are coming together to take immediate action, including Peers for the Planet in the UK and Canada. To close the financing gap, governments need to leverage the support of private capital investors, philanthropic organizations, and other levels of government, such as the provinces and territories in Canada. Canada is pursuing innovation in social finance to enhance our progress on the SDGs by seeking to mobilize private capital for the public good, creating opportunities for investors to finance projects that benefit society and for community organizations to access new sources of funding. We can't blame the global pandemic for this unprecedented climate crisis. The truth is, governments were failing to lead on climate justice prior to COVID-19. In a few weeks, as COP26 begins in Glasgow, Scotland, the relative absence of women and youth in leadership will demonstrate one big gap. The OECD warns us that financing for sustainable development is at risk of collapse. And in the blunt assessment a few days ago of the young woman leader, Greta Thunberg, governments have traded blah, blah, blah for effective action. This has to stop. Governments must align and leverage revenue streams to amplify green social financing with non-governmental investors. Thank you, colleagues.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Representative Independent Senator from the Parliament of Canada, Ms. Mary-Lou McPhedran. Thank you for your remarks. Now, I will go to the Chairman of the Audit Board, Republic of Indonesia, Mr. Agung Farman Sampura. Please take the stage and you're welcome to give us your remarks.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the opportunity given to us. I am the Chairman of the Audit Board of the Republic of Indonesia, and allow me to briefly convey the most important thing related to the handling of COVID and the SDGs in Indonesia. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, no single country is ready for COVID-19 pandemic. Its detrimental impact has been distracting many aspects of life, bringing into volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity era, and jeopardizing national and global effort to achieve the SDGs. This is an urgent call for governments, parliament, and supreme audit institutions to join efforts within their respective roles to help relieving from pandemic and securing the SDGs. The pandemic forces the government to reconsider its national development goals and find sources of fund to cover budget shortfalls. Government of Indonesia has some strategies to deal with this, including 1, sharing the pain among government entities by relocating and refocusing state budget and local budget to cover health, social, and economic sectors. 2, issuing government bonds both by central bank and sharing the burden between governments and central bank on interest expenses. And 3, issuing green bond and Sharia bond to reaffirm government commitment on environment and climate change initiative. In order to assure transparency, accountability, and effectiveness in managing state financing in handling COVID-19, we decided to conduct risk-based comprehensive audit by first implementing audit universe and selecting high-risk audit areas. Second, combining 3 types of audit: financial, performance, and compliance audits. And 3, optimizing the use of big data analytics. With this approach, we was able to reveal $65.57 billion worth of funds involved in handling the COVID-19 pandemic, an amount that undeniably has an impact on government program in achieving SDGs. The audit board also provide insight on potential risks and their mitigations as an early warning system for government to prevent strategic, operational, fraud, financial, and compliance risks. Our experience shows that during the time of crisis, these risks tend to increase. At the moment, we are finalizing our foresight work entitled Indonesia Remade by COVID-19 Scenario, Opportunities and Challenges for Resilient Government. This foresight facilitates policymaking in situations of high uncertainty in the next 5 years through the identification of trends, opportunities, and challenges in multiple sectors, explorations of development to craft strategy for the future, as well as the identification of long-term impact of the measures taken. In making an essential contributions to success of the 2030 agenda and the SDGs, we adopt 4 Oversight approaches. First, assessing the preparedness of SDGs implementations. Second, undertaking performance audit. Third, assessing and supporting the implementations of SDGs 16 and 17, and being models of transparency and accountability. To assure the quality of Indonesia Voluntary National Review, or VNR, on SDGs, we have conducted a review on the VNR 2021 report. This is the first VNR review conducted by a SAR in the world, and this approach can be policy choice to encourage the strengthening of SDGs program. Finally, we believe that cooperations, constructive collaborations, and integrations among all stakeholders, including government, SAI, and parliament, are the key success to ensure the accountability, transparency, and the achievement of SDGs. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your comments, Chairman of the Audit Board, Republic of Indonesia. And ladies and gentlemen, we are going to sample a few more comments and a few more discussions to handle from you. I can see a hand up from Seychelles, there's one from Algeria, but I will encourage all of us to, be active, proactive. Let us know how you're financing the SDGs. And also just a note to let you know that if you have any questions for the IPU, please put them on the chat box, because tomorrow the Secretary General of IPU will be here with us, and we can put him to task to answer some of the questions that you may have that are pressing and you've not been able to answer them here, but which you need the IPU to address. So if you have any of those questions, please put them on chat. We'll have them beforehand and pass them over to him, and he will address them as he makes his remarks tomorrow. Now, let's hear from the member from Seychelles. Please, very, very briefly, let us know what you're doing to finance the SDGs, and then we'll come to Algeria. Seychelles first, then we'll come to Algeria. Member from Seychelles, can you hear me? I saw you hand up. Yes, please go ahead. You have 2 minutes.
Yeah, what we are doing right now is that government is using a new approach with regards to budgeting. So we will be launching the resource-based management approach with regards to the annual budget, where all the government agencies will be given a ceiling to operate under, so that they must ensure that targets are met. And also we have embarked as well on an IMF program, whereby we feel that without an IMF program, we'll not be able to have sustenance with regards to our national economic and social development. And what the Parliament is doing is that it's doing oversight on all the government agencies to ensure that the targets are met. So site visits, I mean, questions in parliaments are raised and motions are put whereby we think that there should be changes. All in all, we are making sure that government is really focusing on getting the economy back on track. And I can tell that we are not doing too badly, but there has to be restructuring. So there has been restructuring, there has been loss of jobs, but in terms of budgeting, we are ensuring that the apportioning of it is being done correctly. I thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Very brief and precise. Before I go to Algeria, I've noticed that we have a new hand. So I'm encouraging members from countries that we've not heard from to please raise your hand and speak. And I see we have a hand from Nicaragua. So member from Algeria, please bear with me. Let me have Nicaragua, then we can come to Algeria. Nicaragua.
Pero nosotros.
Hello, hi.
Parlamentaria por tener la oportunidad de escuchar estos lineamientos para el financiamiento. El Parlamento nicaragüense trabaja de manera coordinada con el gobierno. Al aprobar el presupuesto general de la República, nos basamos en el Plan Nacional de Lucha contra la Pobreza. Y los principios del presupuesto general de la República con los que aprobamos son austeridad, eficiencia, transparencia, disciplina financiera y garantizamos la inversión social en educación, salud, financiamiento al cambio climático, a los ministerios para reforestación, fondos para enfrentar los desastres naturales y estamos comprometidos con un crecimiento económico que se refleje en el desarrollo y vida de las y los nicaragüenses. Uno de los principios también del presupuesto general de la República es la protección del empleo y contribuir a un desarrollo económico y social con un enfoque inclusivo, garantizando no dejar a nadie atrás, como es el principio del ODS. Entonces, desde el gobierno y el Parlamento nicaragüense, seguiremos trabajando un presupuesto con enfoque de género, garantizando inversión social para elevar la vida de cada nicaragüense, como es el compromiso del Parlamento. Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much. And now we come to Algeria. If anyone else would like to take the floor on issues around financing for the SDGs, please let me know. If don't feel left out, Thailand, any other country, I can see so many countries on the chat, but I haven't heard from you. So if you feel you need a few seconds to take the floor, please let us know. But for now, let's go to Algeria.
شكرا. يعني التدخل يكون حول موضوع تجنيد الموارد المالية لتحقيق أهداف التنمية المستدامة. في الحقيقة هذا موضوع مهم جدا وأتناوله من شقين. الشق الأول هو ضرورة تجنيد الموارد المالية لتحقيق أهداف التنمية المستدامة على المستوى الدولي وحشد الأموال والموارد المالية من خلال وكالات دولية المانحة ومن خلال يعني الدول الغنية في اتجاه يعني الدول الفقيرة، وهذا لتحقيق نوع من العدل والإنصاف في توزيع الثروات على المستوى العالمي والتعاون الدولي. بالنسبة لي على مستوى يعني على مستوى القطري أو على مستوى كل بلد، في يعني من الواضح أن دور البرلمان كمؤسسة تشريعية دور أساسي في مسألة تجنيد الأموال وحشدها وإقرارها من خلال الميزانية، وهذا ما يقره بالنسبة إلينا في الجزائر الدستور. الدستور الجزائري يحدد دورا أساسيا وهاما بالنسبة للبرلمان، وهو مسألة التشريع وسن القوانين ومسألة الرقابة على تنفيذ الميزانية وتنفيذ الأداء الحكومي بشكل عام. ويعني إقرار الميزانية أمر حيوي وأساسي ويطلع به البرلمان من خلال يعني معرفة يعني تخصيص الموارد والتخصيص الأمثل للموارد. وإذا تعلق الأمر بتحقيق أهداف التنمية المستدامة بالنسبة للجزائر، الجزائر لديها يعني في نظامها القانوني والدستور الجزائري أن الدولة الجزائرية دولة اجتماعية وتهتم بالطبقات الاجتماعية وبمجالات الرعاية الصحية والتعليم المجاني، وتخصص ميزانية معتبرات يعني تضاهي أو تقترب من في حدود 15 مليار دولار سنويا، نسميها ميزانية التحويلات الاجتماعية، وهي ميزانية كبيرة كلها مخصصة لتحقيق الأهداف التنمية المستدامة، يتعلق الأمر بتحسين القضاء على الفقر ورعاية الطبقات الهشة، تحسين مستوى جودة التعليم ومجانية التعليم وتعميم التعليم الإلزامي خاصة، تحسين الرعاية الصحية. فكل هذا متكفل به بالنسبة لنا في الجزائر. ثم كذلك عندنا في الجزائر بدأنا في مقاربة جديدة، وهي يعني مقاربة الميزانية التشاركية، بمعنى كيف يمكن للفواعل المجتمعية والمجتمع المدني وإشراكهم في عملية يعني إعداد الميزانية وإبداء الرأي، ثم كذلك في عملية المساءلة والرقابة بالتعاون مع يعني الأطر القانونية الأخرى التي تنظمها القوانين وتسمح بها القوانين، وخاصة الدور اللي يقوم به البرلمان كسلطة تشريعية تقرر الميزانية، ثم كسلطة يعني عندها حق المساءلة والرقابة على أداء الحكومة وعلى تنفيذ الميزانية من خلال ماذا؟ من خلال مساءلة الحكومة ومعرفة هل تم التخصيص الفعلي للموارد المالية وحشد هذه الأموال، وأنها ذهبت فعلا في سبيل تحقيق الغايات المرتبطة أساسا بتحقيق التنمية المستدامة، سواء تعلق بالقضاء على الفقر أو تحقيق التعليم الجيد أو تحقيق الرعاية الصحية أو ضمان وصول يعني التزود بالخدمات الأساسية، وخاصة التزود بالطاقة والمياه والبنية التحتية. ومسألة يعني الجنس، أي يعني عندنا في الجزائر يعني خطوات متقدمة في مسألة تمكين المرأة، التمكين السياسي والتمكين المجتمعي، كذلك الرعاية الطفولة والأمومة إلى غير ذلك من المجالات. وعموما يعني بالنسبة لنا أن الأهداف التنمية المستدامة 2030 هي متضمنة في البرامج والخطط الحكومية، سواء تعلق أمر بالأهداف الكبرى المتعلقة بالتغيرات المناخية أو الأهداف المتعلقة بالسياسات الاقتصادية الأخرى، يعني تؤخذ بعين الاعتبار عند تحديد البرامج والأولويات في مجال السياسة العامة في الجزائر. وشكرا.
Indeed, thank you very, very much, member from Algeria, for your remarks. And now, finally, for the last speaker for this session, I can only see one hand up, so I believe that's it. And allow me to welcome member from Chad. Please take the floor. You have 2 minutes to give us your remarks on financing for the SDGs. Member from Chad. Issa Mardo, Mr. Issa Mardo from Chad, would you love to take the stage? All right. Okay. Well, I guess that's it. Then we can go to the next session. Member from Chad. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I think that marks the end of our presentations for this session on financing for the SDGs. And once again, thank you very much for all your interventions, all the commitments you're making, and all the questions that have been raised on chat. Now let's go to the rapporteur, Mr. Sihar Sitoras, who's the chair of the SDG Task Force in Indonesia. Just give us, a summary of the day's highlights and wrap this up. Let's see what you've captured as, the most important elements of this day. Mr. Sihar, the floor is yours.
Right, thank you. Honorable parliamentarians, it's an honor to give some highlights from today's meeting. There are so many important points made by participants today. So hopefully I can wrap it up in a short time. First of all, we all agree that climate change should be one of our priorities. Climate change, if not managed, could cause large social and economic impacts around the world, as the impact could be irreversible. Two, Parliament as people representatives should take their responsibility for addressing climate change and global warming by integrating such issues into legislation, state budget, and scrutiny processes in line with the United Nations Environmental Programme, the Paris Climate Agreement, and the Sustainable Development Goals. It is recognized also that clean or green energy is still more expensive than fossil energy. Therefore, a clean energy transition needs more careful preparedness to avoid potential crises. Recent changes in the climate are widespread, rapid, and intensifying, and unprecedented in thousands of years. In looking at this issue, we need to re-examine the Earth's temperature as a main indicator. It is reported that human influence has warmed the climate at a rate that is unprecedented in the last 2,000 years. As an example, compared to the average temperatures in 1850, the Earth has gotten warmer by 1.1 degrees Celsius. Climate change also already affecting every region on Earth in multiple ways, and the changes we experience will increase with future emissions and additional warming. A sixth point is that the sea level, we can see that sea level will continue to rise for the next 4,000 of years. The retreat of glaciers and loss of Arctic ice will continue for decades, while Greenland and Antarctica will continue to lose mass. However, some changes could be slowed, and others could even be stopped by limiting global warming. Climate change is a common challenge to countries around the globe, as the MPs from Malaysia, Mexico, Chad, Congo, and Syria, as well as graduate students from India, has shown in their interventions. From the threat of desertification in Africa due to progressive degradation of soil and implementation of several water catchment projects along several countries along the Congo River. Also, there is a threat to glacier in Himalaya and degradation of water quality in India. Extreme weather phenomenon is also experienced by Chad. Political stability could also be considered as a significant factor, as shown in Syria, which has established a minister on water and environment. However, the political turmoil in the country, it has put a pause to the efforts to mitigate the impact of climate change. 9, green economy can facilitate new jobs creation, economic growth. It is irrefutable in economic sense. Study shows that the implementation of clean energy generates more jobs. With the right policy, clean energy can create 24 million new jobs by the end of this decade. There is a mixed report card among nations on the implementation of green energy. However, the view has been optimistic. Green recovery is the only viable option to achieve the SDGs by 2030. It is also important to align the COVID-19 recovery and climate change policy. In the process, it is also important to ensure that no one left behind. It is very critical that COVID-19 put people, especially women and other marginalized groups, at the heart of the recovery toward building resilience. This could be done through social protection program, vocational education on green technology, and investment in a community-driven program. As we are living in the interconnected world, it is important to ensure that the recovery process enables a transformation that encompasses a system-wide intervention. Lastly, funding is very important. As mentioned by several my fellow MPs from Canada and from other countries, funding facilitates means of implementation, which is key for climate change mitigation and adaptation actions. That's what I can sum up from today's meeting. There are so many more points, but I think this is quite thorough and quite complete, and we'll try to improve before tomorrow's meeting. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much for summarizing that up for us and wrapping up and giving us today's highlights. Very, very neatly done. And now we have seen a lot of activity on chat. We have seen a lot of you asking questions, giving your comments on chat. And at this point, please allow me to invite the digital correspondent, Alexandra, to just tell us what has been happening. Alexandra, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mercy. So the first thing that was happening, it was related to previous sessions, was the whole question of NDCs and nationally determined contributions for climate change. Different countries have shared what their countries are doing in this regard. What is really important is that there is parliamentary oversight on how these commitments are actually turned into action. There is important legislative work that has to happen to make sure that these commitments are respected. So there is definitely a lot for parliaments to do to turn them into reality. Then we also saw quite a few reactions and questions to the guidance note on SDG financing that the IPU produced, and the whole issue of SDG financing. Special focus was made on private sector financing and how that funding can be better used or mobilized. The second issue was the very important question of gender-sensitive financing of SDGs. I put in the chat a link to a publication that the IPU produced some years ago. I think it is quite useful still if we try to look at what it is trying to say through the SDG lens. So if you have a look at the link that I shared, I'm pretty sure you will find this publication still useful and for your SDG work. And finally, just to say that our publication that my colleague Karin talked about earlier in this session is being finalized in terms of layout. So we will put it on the website with ipu.org in the coming days. It will exist initially in English and French. You parliamentarians, your parliaments are more than welcome to translate this publication into your local language. All we need to know is that you have done it. And so please do keep us posted about how you use it. We would be happy to assist you in using it. So please don't hesitate to be in touch with us. Thank you. And thank you so much for your active engagement today. We look forward to seeing you tomorrow.
Great. Thank you very much, Alexandra. And that marks the end of day 2 of this event. I feel like today was really short compared to yesterday. But it's fine, we still have tomorrow. So we have just reminded ourselves that parliamentarians are uniquely placed to help raise basically the necessary public awareness of climate change to ensure that citizens are involved in decisions on climate change, to recognize the role of local communities in implementing climate and environmental policies, and maximizing existing revenue streams and budgetary expenditure towards the SDGs. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for being a part of this day, for your contribution, for your participation, and for just being here. And we really appreciate that determination to make sure that we all move together towards achieving the Agenda 2030. Now, tomorrow, we look at the way forward. So let us all meet here again for the final leg to share ideas of possible actions that parliaments could put in place to achieve the SDGs without further delay. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much again. And it is a very good evening from Nairobi. And from wherever you are, I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Bye-bye and see you tomorrow.